Afternoon, everybody. Happy humid Saturday. Feels like the middle of summer out here. The Midwest, some of you may or may not know, the Midwest was just pounded with crazy storms yesterday. You know, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, some of those areas got some really severe weather. That all rolled into Iowa overnight. It was about 11:30 last night was the final time I came out here to check the cows. They're actually up at the 16-acre lease, so if it looks a little different, that's because this is a part of the lease that they have never grazed before. I swear, he knows whenever I'm starting a video. He loves to be center of attention. So yeah, it is really, really humid. It was a long night last night. We dodged a bullet. Unfortunately, certain areas of Iowa weren't so lucky. In fact, there was a town in Iowa that half the town got leveled and flattened by a tornado that rolled through. But the sun, the heat, the humidity is out today, which is going to fire up storms again for us. So it's going to be another long night. Yeah, let me talk about this lease a little bit. But first, let's go over what we grazed before and how we got here. So I'll be right back with you guys. So the last day that the cows were on that little half-acre meadow, I ended up throwing out a couple of bales of hay, and that was just to make sure that they were content with the lack of perimeter fence out there and the fact that if they had escaped, they would have just disappeared into the abyss. I wanted to make sure that they had plenty to eat. So then I ended up moving the cows back home to that front 2.5 acres up by the house. And I really didn't want to touch this stuff until June. I'm going to be gone out of the country for a bit in June. And I wanted to have a fresh, ungrazed pasture that I could just lead the herd in and not have to worry about it. But this stuff was ready to go. The orchard grass was starting to head out. A lot of the shorter turf grass had already had a seed head put on it. And where it fell in my work schedule, it just made sense to throw them in here for a few days. So they ended up doing a really, really good job. I was quite impressed. I did not strip graze this at all. I gave them the whole 2.5 acres right out of the gate. And by the time I pulled them off of that 5 days later, you would have thought that I came through there with a lawnmower. They really leveled everything out. They made it really, really even. I was very happy with the results. And the fact that, again, not strip grazing them, they didn't overgraze anything. They just kept moving and taking the tops off of everything. So then it came time to move the cattle up the road to that 16-acre lease, and honestly, it went really, really well. I took my time. It was the only thing I had going on all day. I ended up doing 3 separate loads. I did not want to stress the girls out. Again, I only have 2 pregnant, but the last thing I want is for a spontaneous abortion or something to go on because I'm rushing or the cows are stressed this close to the calves coming. So the haul went really, really well, and the herd actually seemed really, really happy to get back up here. So then after I gave them a little bit of time up there where I unloaded them, I ultimately walked them about 1,000 feet down to the first pasture that I wanted them to graze. And I'm actually really shocked that they did such a good job following me. You know, they had had about a week of good grazing up until this point, so they had a taste for grass. They knew what to expect. They were very excited, but they stayed behind me. And the fact that they walked through this ungrazed pasture for that distance with no problems, I'm very, very happy with them. And they started to get a little excited towards the end. And as you can see, they ended up blowing past me. They saw those gates were open. They saw their water trough and they knew where they were going. But it was so good to see the herd this happy. And I was relieved that after they ran around the new area and got the lay of the land, they calmed down and they started grazing right away. All right, so it actually wasn't that bad getting them out here. For the first time ever, I think, the cows loaded up fairly easily. They had the opportunity to kind of hang out and relax up there by the house before we marched them down. There is permanent 4-strand barbed wire on one side of this property, but It was very dilapidated. In fact, there was a section of cluster of trees up there that had fallen over, totally taken out the fence. I had to go through, restretch a bunch of stretched out fence, patch a bunch of holes, and then I tightened up the spacing a little bit. But that's just one side. The fence really starts to fall apart once you get past the temporary electric I put up. There is no fence on the full north side. And then obviously I ran double strand all the way up. I made sure to hug the trees. They've been watching that storm that rolled through and that's coming through this weekend. They have been watching it for quite a while. So I knew it was coming. I wanted to put them in an area that they were going to be able to get out of hail, get out of wind. Obviously that's a catch-22 because all of these trees could be dropping branches, could be falling over, whatever. So it could be taking out the fence, could be even injuring the cattle. So I got lucky last night. We'll have to see how tonight goes. This particular area had been neglected. So even when the old owner owned it, he didn't have his horses back here. He never came back here. And then the current owner, when she bought it, it wasn't even kept up as far as being mowed. You can kind of see some tree piles there. I spent all of last fall going through, cleaning up a lot of the dead trees, a lot of the trees that needed to come out. They weren't serving any purpose. And just trying to open up the canopy to allow more grass growth and then mowing this down. I mowed it down a few times over the fall just to try and knock back a lot of those really big broadleaves. The grass quality is really good. The soil quality is really, really good out here because it has been, left alone for so long. It's very spongy, very soft. But there's just not a ton of grass growth. Just like in my last video when I talked about it was a lot of work to set up an area just to run the cows through for a few days. This is the same thing. I mean, setting up all this temporary electric and running 1,000 feet of garden hose, all the water troughs, all the mineral, everything down here was a lot of work. And I'm probably only going to get another couple of days out of here. But, you kind of got to do what you got to do. So kind of like that little meadow, half-acre meadow in the last video I posted. It's not a huge deal if this gets overgrazed because they are actually not going to be back on it until fall. So I don't know if the camera's picking it up. It looks nice and green. It actually looks like they still have some forage to eat. And they do. I mean, there's grass in here, but so much of it is this broadleaf stuff. We've got, some ironweed, goldenrod, May apple, I think it is. May apple, maybe. All sorts of stuff in here that just gets 6-8 feet tall. Some of it gets spiky, stemmy, and hardwoody. It really crowds out the grass growth. One thing that I was thinking a lot about over the last couple of days with this pasture that I always forget to remind myself when I'm trying to decide, if the cows have enough to eat, if they're doing all right, and that's sward density. So the cows have actually moved out of here. This is a few days later after I started doing that video. I'm moving them to a new section, but a cow can only take anywhere from 25,000 to 40,000 bites a day. If I were to reach my hand down in here and simulate like a cow, and I'm grabbing a fistful of grass is obviously great. If I get anywhere from 25,000 to 40,000 fistful of grass, that is the most amount of feed that I'm going to get with each bite. Now, the sward density being an issue, if I come down here and I go to grab and it only ends up being a finger's worth of grass, that's a lot more bites I'm going to have to take. And so that's going to be on that higher end, that 40,000 bites, and just to get enough to fill the cows up. So you obviously want, with every single bite they're taking, you want the most grass getting shoved down into that rumen as possible. That leads to fat, healthy, happy cows. But if they are constantly wandering, again, the patchiness, we've got weeds and weeds and weeds, but then good grass, decent grass, some grass over there, some grass all the way down there. So if they constantly have to wander this area to even just get bites of grass, and then every time they take a mouthful, they're really only getting a finger's worth, a pinch worth, and not a whole fistful of grass, they're just not getting enough to eat. And walking back and forth, they are going to be expending more energy really than they can take in because they're just using so much walking back and forth. So I always forget to think about that when it comes to deciding if the cows are ready to move. The other thing is this lease property, because of the way it's shaped, it's always tough to tell not being able to strip graze. Being able to look at a strip and say, oh yeah, there's no grass left, or oh yeah, there's plenty of grass left. I need to change my strip size accordingly. Just letting them into an area like this, it's really hard to tell if they are taking too much or not getting enough, simply because I really have no gauge. I can't look at yesterday's feed consumption or the feed consumption for morning and now it's afternoon and decide if they're getting too much. The other thing you have to think about with a large area is, even though I'm seeing a decent amount of grass left, that could be urinated on, that could be defecated on, that could be trampled, it could be walked on. So, like Greg Judy always says, a cow eats with 5 mouths. It's one true mouth and then it's 4 hooves. So just because it looks like a tasty clump of grass to me, that I'm like, well, sure, there's plenty of grass left, doesn't necessarily mean that the cows actually want to eat it or will eat it. So just food for thought. We got more storms coming in. It's looking super dark off to the west, and I still have to set up where they're going to now. So that'll be it for this one, guys. Questions, comments, concerns, sarcastic remarks, you know the drill. Leave them down below. Find the ranch on Instagram at WR_ranch, and we'll talk to you later.